Hello and welcome to the fourth part of our tutorial. Today I'm going to teach you how to create highlights and shadows, and we are starting with this picture, and by the end of the tutorial you'll learn how to create those highlights and those shadows. Last time we stopped at this point. We selected the subject and we placed it in our background. Today I'm going to show you how I do my shadows and the highlights for the characters. First of all, let's hide the fence, both fences. Now let's add some small shadow underneath the main character, which is this lady. So let's go to the lady group, and behind this layer I'm going to create a new layer. So hold Ctrl and press the new layer icon, and this creates a layer underneath the layer that you are first selecting on. Alright, so we have this layer, let's call it shadow. Now let's set the blending mode to multiply. Now let's zoom in a bit, and I'm going to take the brush tool now. Right click and choose a soft brush. The flow should be around 10%. Okay, now hold Alt and select darker color from our image, which could be something like that from here, not the black color. Then we are going to slowly paint around her edges, so around the edges of our selected subject. So just paint around, and this will be our main shadow. Alright, so we've created a shadow, and I think it needs a bit of lower opacity. So let's reduce the opacity to something like 60 or 65%. So we created this shadow. If you want, now you can duplicate this layer again by pressing Ctrl J. On the top layer, add a layer mask. Take again the brush tool with the black color selected, and just start to paint further away to hide that part of that shadow. So now we have a more pronounced shadow closer to our subject, and a more faded shadow as the shadow goes away. Alright, so now let's create a new group and bring all those two layers inside this group, and let's name this group shadows. Let's move on. Go to the first adjustment layer, which is hue and saturation, this one, and create another one, this time levels. We created this layer to darken a part of our subject, because if we have the light coming from the top right, that means that a part of her body will be darker than the rest of the body that intersects with the light that comes from the house. Click on the thumbnail now of our levels adjustment layer and drag this white slider to the left, and you can go around 100. Now go again on the mask this time, take the brush tool or press the letter B, and with the black color selected, just start to paint on the top part of our subject, because here the image should be brighter than the rest of the image. So zoom in, decrease the flow to even less, something like 3%, and start to paint some other parts also as the light bounces on her dress, on her body. We have our main shadows ready now. Now, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial, we cut the hair like that because today I'm going to teach you how to paint some hair. So create a new layer, let's call it hair. Alright, now take again the brush tool, and I have a brush that I used in my previous tutorials, and you can have it also. I'll put the link to download it in this tutorial description. So the flow should be around 20%. Let's reduce the size of the brush, and let's slowly paint with that dark color on the edges of our hair, because as you can see in the previous selection we left this area like that, and it doesn't really look good because you can see the hair is cut really hard on the top part. Alright, so I'm going to slowly paint this area with that darker color, and then after this is like a base for the next hair colors. So you must have a darker color first, so you can set up the lighter colors afterwards. So I think now looks good. I'm going to repeat the process, this time hold Alt again and pick another color, which is this reddish color, and I'm going to decrease the flow to around 9-10%, and I'm going to slowly paint with that reddish color on top of that black color. So I think now it looks good. If you zoom out, you'll see that it looks nice. Now I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to reduce the size of the brush more, and I'm going to select a color which is the brightest color. And now I'm going to slowly paint on the edges of her hair, something like that, some small hairlines, and also you can do the same thing inside. But now let's reduce the opacity also to around 50%. And I'm going to do the same thing, but be careful not to exaggerate with those parts of her hair. Now at the end, I'm going to add a mask to this layer, the hair layer. I'm going to take the soft brush tool and I'm going to increase the opacity back to 100%, and I'm going to paint where I think I exaggerated with that previous brush where I use it to draw the hair. So I'm slowly painting with black color to reduce that hair that I did before. So now I think it looks okay. So we have our subject ready to add the highlights now. After we finished with the hair, we are going to start to add more shadows and lights to the subject. And now let's create a new layer. Go to Layer, New, and create a new layer, and the mode should be Soft Light, and fill it with 50% gray. And we are going to name this one Dodge and Burn. Now drag this layer on top of the group and hold Alt to clip it to affect only the group. Alright, so you should have this little arrow pointing down. So zoom in. Now select this Dodge and Burn layer and take the black color. And underneath you should have the white color. You can do that by pressing the letter D to reset the swatches. Now, with the brush tool selected, be sure that the flow is around 5-6%. And now if we use the black color and start to paint on the darkest parts of our subject, it will make those parts even darker. So be sure that with black you paint only where you have already darker parts on your image. Don't use the black color to paint where you have lighter parts on your image. So now I'm going to make those darker parts even darker to help me in achieving better highlights at the end. So now I'm using this brush with the black color selected, and I'm just painting where I have black or darker parts on my image. I'm going to speed up this a bit. Now I'm going to change the color to white, and I'm going to paint where we have the lightest part on our image. I'm repeating the process where I see white or brighter parts on my image. The same, I'm going to speed up this because it takes a while to do them. Okay, I know this takes a while, but if you want to achieve better results, you should spend times on little details like that. So let's hide this one. So this is without the dodge and burn method that I use with the soft light, and this is how it looks after we apply those shadows and lights. Now let's talk about the highlights. We have our light source that is coming from the house. So let's increase a bit the flow. We have our light that is coming from the house, something like that, and it's gonna hit our subject something around those parts, and a bit on the hand, also the face, the hair, and some parts of the dress. So those parts should have this orange color on her body. Now that you know that, let me explain you how I do my highlights. First, let's create a new layer. Go on layer, new layer, and here let's rename this one to color base, and the mode should be linear dodge, and fill it with black. Alright, let's clip this layer inside our group layer by holding Alt and click between the layers. Let's decrease the flow to around 3-4%. Alright, and now with the brush selected, I'm going to paint on those parts that I just showed you before. So don't worry if it looks weird now. We are going to use the blend-if method to make this look better and more realistic. So I said that the light should hit our subject, something like that. And after you finish with painting, alright, let's double click on this layer. If you look on the blend-if part of these settings, here underneath, underlying layer, and hold Alt. Hold Alt and click between, and drag this to the right. And if you look on our subject, you'll see that the light is fading. So I think we have our base, our color base ready, something like that. Hit OK. Now if you want, you can continue to paint, and you'll see that the color of that light, it's much better and more realistic. Alright, so we prepare our subject. Now we set up our color base. For the next step of our tutorial, I'm going to do the rim lights, the highlights of the subject, and I'm using the same color and of course the same method. So go to layer, new, and create the same linear dodge and fill it with black and clip it inside the group. And now with the orange color selected, you can start to paint on the edges of the subject, and it's not enough to paint only on the edges, you should paint also inside the dress. So now we are looking for the brightest parts of our image. You know the brightest parts because we used it in the dodge and burn before. Now I'm going to paint on that side of the subject, and I'm going to enter more inside the subject because most of the people are doing only the sides and they do not cover the other bright areas from inside the subject. So here we have some bright areas. As you can see, they should have that orange color also. Don't worry if the orange color is too pronounced, you can always switch to black. Alright, let's exaggerate a bit here, for example. So here I exaggerated, so this color is too pronounced. I'm switching to black, and now if I use the black color to paint that area again, it will fade it away, because if you look at the thumbnail, it's filled with black. So that means if I paint again with black, it will fade that color, whatever color I have there. So now I'm painting with black, and as you can see, it faded that orange color. So let's switch to orange and continue to add the highlights. So now I'm going to speed up a bit because this takes a while, but the important thing is for you to understand that not the side it's important, because as I said, most of the people, they are doing only the sides of the subject, but you should go more inside because you should have some lights bouncing inside the dress, for example, or the hand. If you look here, we should have some a bit of color also, not only on the sides. Alright, so I'm going to speed up this a bit and see you really soon. Okay, so we created the highlights with the orange color. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to paint with the white color. So fill it with linear dodge again, and also with black. And I'm going to clip it by holding Alt. Alright, now that you understood the process, we are going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to use the white color, not the orange color. So I'm going to make those highlights pop up even more. So now with the white color selected, I'm going to go again on the parts that I want to make more visible. So with the white color selected, and this time the flow should be around 2-3%, let's say 2%, I'm going to slowly paint again on those areas where I wanted the light to hit our subject more. Okay, so this is the way I do the highlights, the rim lights. Let's recap a bit. So the first thing that I'm doing is set up a color base by using the blend if. Alright, so don't forget to use the blend if. Next, what I'm doing is adding that orange or that light source color to the sides and to the interior of my subject. And the last one is adding the white color that makes everything pop up more. So this is how I do the highlights on this subject. Alright, let's move on now to the eagle. I'm going to do the same things, so if you paid attention, you will know how to do them even faster. So go to the eagle folder. First thing that I'm doing is adding this levels adjustment layer and clip this levels adjustment layer inside our eagle. So press this little icon and add that adjustment inside the eagle layer. Now let's drag this white slider more to the left, something like that, around 100, and with the black color selected. Alright, so increase the size of the brush, and the flow should be around 10%. And I'm going to paint where I think the eagle should have more light, and that area remains lighter and brighter, and the other areas of my eagle will stay darker. So I think the eagle should have some color around here and on the neck and the face. And I think we are ready. So now the eagle looks much better like that. And next thing, let's add that dodge and burn that we created here. So go to layer, new layer, and use the soft light and fill it with 50% gray. And clip this layer inside the eagle, and let's rename this to dodge and burn. Now with the black color selected, and the flow should be around 5%. Alright, 5. I'm going to paint using the black color to darken the parts of the eagle more. I'm switching to white, and I'm going to emphasize the brightest area of the eagle. And I think we're done. Now let's create the base color for the highlights. So go and create new layer and choose this time the linear dodge and fill it with black. And place it inside the layer by holding Alt. Alright, now I'm going to take again that orange color, something like that, and I'm going to paint where I think the lights will hit our subject. I think. Alright, then double click on the layer and click between those sliders and drag the right slider more to the right. And we created the base. Now create a new one, so layer new, and from here linear dodge and fill it with black. And clip it inside by holding Alt. Now zoom in, lower the brush size and start to paint on the sides and in the interior of the feather, for example. So I'm going to slowly paint where I think the lights will hit our eagle, something like that. Alright, and don't forget to go inside, not only on the sides of the eagle, so paint inside also. Now I'm going to switch to black and hide those areas that I exaggerate with. And now the last step is adding the white color. So repeat the process by creating a new layer, set it to linear dodge, fill it with black and clip it inside by holding Alt. And then switch to the white color and you will draw with the same brush the sides of the eagle and also go a bit inside. Okay, so we prepare the eagle also. This is my method of doing the highlights and the rim lights for the subjects. Okay, now let's bring back the fence and let's apply the same things on the fences also. So let's go to the fence folder or group and we are taking care of this one, which is here. First, let's add the levels. So go create the levels adjustment layer and clip it inside and decrease the lights to around 100 and start to paint with the black color. Alright, and the flow should be around 10%. And I'm going to paint here on this side because this side should be brighter and this side should be darker. Now let's add the shadows and lights using the soft light method, which I use it instead of using the dodge and burn from here. Go and create a new layer and fill it with soft light and also with 50% gray and add it by holding Alt inside the fence layer. And now with the black color selected and the flow around 5%, I'm going to paint on the darker areas of my fence and I'll leave some parts for the brighter areas, which I'm going to paint using the white color. So here on the bottom should be darker and on the top should be brighter. Alright, I'm going to switch to white and I'm going to bring some lights back to the image. Alright, so I'm going to speed up this a bit because this fence is really small and it won't be that visible. Alright, so I think we are done. And now let's set up the base color. Go to layer new and choose linear dodge and fill it with black. And hold Alt and clip this layer inside the fence layer. And now with the orange color, just paint on this side and don't worry, we'll use the blend if like the way we did until now. So double click on the layer, hold Alt, click between the layers and drag this slider to the right. And now as you can see, we have our image ready, the base color is ready. And now the last step is create a new layer using the same linear dodge, fill it with black and clip it by holding Alt. And with the same orange color, just paint, slowly paint on the sides to bring some more color. Alright, I think this one needs a blend if also, so double click and choose by holding Alt and drag this slider more to the right. Okay, and the first base color I think is too bright. I'm going to decrease the opacity to around 50%, 60%, and I'll do the same thing with the other layer. So we created our base color for our fence, and I'm going to do the same thing with the other one, but this one doesn't require that much processing because it's in the front and it won't be visible that much. So go on the other fence layer, this one, and just add levels adjustment layer, clip it inside and drag the white slider to around 100%. And now with the brush selected, select the brush tool and use the black color and just paint on the top area to bring that part up and to be more visible than the other sides. Alright, and I think this is enough. Let's make the fence even darker, something like that. And now we are going to use only one adjustment layer, now only one linear dodge, and fill it with black, add it inside. And now I'm going to paint with this orange color on the top and on some parts where I think it will hit our fence. The light should hit our fence. Alright, something like that. And now I'm going to double click and use the blend diff by holding Alt and drag the slider more to the right. Alright, and now our fence is ready, and of course I'm going to reduce the opacity more to around 60%. I'm going to paint a bit with white on this levels adjustment layer because I think it's too bright, and I'll make it a bit darker. Alright, so this fence is ready also. If you want more color you can paint, of course, again with the orange color. If you think that it needs more color, you just use the orange color to paint more on the fence. Alright, so now we prepare our fences also, and I'm going to add some shadows to this fence because we have the lights coming from the right and it should have some shadows on the left part. So be sure that you are on these layers, create a new layer underneath it, so create a new layer, alright, and drag it to be inside this folder, this group, and let's name this one shadow. Set the blending mode to multiply, hold Ctrl and click on the fence layer to select it. Now go on the shadow layer, take the paint bucket tool and select a color by holding Alt from the background, let's say this color from the grass, and fill this layer with that color. Deselect by pressing Ctrl D, and now we have our shadow. Now let's take care of this shadow. So first right click and convert it to a smart object. Now press Ctrl and T. After you press Ctrl and T, let's zoom out and now hold Ctrl. And I'm going to add some perspective to this shadow. So play around with the corners of the shadow and just drag until you think you have the best position for that shadow. Alright, we managed to find a good position. Let's drag it more to match our fence. And now we're going to add a mask, and with the black color selected and increase the flow to 100%, I'm going to hide those areas by painting on the mask. So I'm going to hide those areas, and now I'm going to set the opacity to around 25-30%, and I'm going to add some blur. So go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to add some 3 or 4% shadow. Let's increase a bit the opacity, and I think we have our shadow. It doesn't need to be perfect because this is not really that visible, but it has to be there. Of course you can adjust some things, you can drag it and adjust it, and of course you can spend more time with it if you want. But I think we have our shadow ready. Let's go on the mask again and paint with black some areas, but this time the flow should be around 10%. So this part should be not that visible, and I think now the shadow looks good. Now let's do some other things to this fence. Because this fence is a bit farther away from the point of view, I'm going to add some blur to this further part. Go to the fence layer, choose filter, blur gallery, fill blur, and let's set this center blur to 0. Now this part of our image should be more visible, so let's set a blur of 3%, and here farther away let's set a 5% blur, and let's see, I think a 4% works best for our image, and let's drag it here on the bottom, and it looks much better. As you can see, our mask is still visible really well and the grass is too sharp. So what we can do now, go to the fence mask, take the blur tool here from the blur menu and just start to paint with that blur, and you'll see that the grass it's becoming blurred on the areas that you paint. So now I think our fence looks really nice. Now let's do the same thing with the fence in front, but because this fence is in front of our point of view, this will be even more blurred than the other one. So go to this layer and choose filter, but this time we are going to use Gaussian blur. And I'm going to blur it more, let's say something like that, or even more. Alright, and hit OK. Okay, because we added this blur, we need to go to the grass, which is this one, grass layer, and let's convert this background to a smart object. Alright, so we have this background, and now we do the same thing, go to filter, blur gallery, and choose fill blur. And of course, let's set this center blur to 0, and here on the bottom, we are going to set some blur, around 10%, and where it meets the subject, let's take it to 0, because we don't need blur over there. Alright, and we can still use some blur here on the top, but not that much, around 4%. And also here around 4% also. Okay, so we managed to do that, hit OK, and we are going to do the same thing with the rest of the remaining images. So go to the house layer. Now I'm going to select all the layers inside this house group, and by holding shift I select all of them, and then right click, convert them to a smart object, and this part it's a smart object. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the filter, blur gallery, fill blur, and now I'm going to set this center blur to around 7%, and I'm going to leave it like that. So we have this blur ready, and the last one is the sky. Let's go to the sky, convert it to a smart object, so right click, convert it to a smart object, and then do the same thing, but this time take the Gaussian blur, and I'm going to leave the radius around 10%. The reason that I'm converting everything to smart objects is that if I want to modify, let's say, let's go to the fence, and I want to modify the amount of blur on this one, I just double click and here it is. The settings are already there. So it's important to have everything converted to a smart object, because you can always modify the settings. So today we started with this part of our tutorial, and we learned how to create highlights and shadows. In the last part I'm going to teach you how to add all those effects that you like, and also we are going to add some more lights coming from the house, and at the end I'm going to teach you how to use the camera raw filter, which is one of the most powerful tools that Photoshop has for our photo manipulations. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you already subscribed to my channel. If not, please consider to subscribe, and also follow me on Instagram, because there I do a lot of collaborations with a lot of artists, and I can do that with you. So don't forget to follow me also on my Instagram account. See you next time.